All right, you're ready for Chapter 4. Chapter 4 will cover exponential expressions. We'll review what exponents mean in case you've forgotten, and then we'll talk about the order of operations rules. So let's start with exponents. In an expression like this, 5 squared, or 5 to the second power, the 5 is called the base, and the little number up here, the 2, is called the exponent. And the exponent basically tells you how many of the bases to multiply together. In other words, 5 squared means multiply 2 5s together, and 5 times 5 is just 25.
Another term used for exponent is power. So some of you that have heard power, that's another usage.
That's right. So some will call these power expressions as well. Similarly here, negative 5 squared, that means multiply 2 negative 5s together. And there are 2 negative signs, so the answer is positive. 5 times 5 again is just 25. Now, Jerry, what is the popular wrong answer to this problem?
Well, the answer that about 70 to 80% of our students that give us the first time is positive 25.
Right. So we need to make sure you see the difference between this problem in which the negative 5 is inside parentheses and this problem where it's not. If the negative sign is not in parentheses, basically you do the exponent first and then make the answer negative. So you might visualize this to yourself as minus 5 squared. The 5 squared means multiply 2 5s together, so this is minus 25. And the opposite of positive 25 is negative 25. Make sure you look closely at this one and this one because students tend to mix these up. And unfortunately, you will see this a lot. It's a problem that will show up, I can almost guarantee it, on your test, regardless of who your teacher is. And something like that often shows up on the exit test as well.
Absolutely.
All right, so let's look at a few fractions raised to a power. These work exactly the same way. It'll just give you a chance to make sure you remember some of the material from the previous chapter. This one tells you to multiply 3 of these fractions together. That is 3/4 times 3/4 times 3/4. And there's nothing I can cancel anywhere, so I just multiply across the top. 3 times 3 is 9, times 3 is 27. And I multiply across the bottom. 4 times 4 is 16, times 4 is 64. So there's our final answer.
Easy enough.
Similarly here, this says multiply 2 negative 1/5 together. As Jerry recommended, let's think about the sign first. Negative times negative is positive, so the answer is going to be positive. No canceling I can do here, so 1 times 1 is 1. 5 times 5 is 25. Answer here is 1/25. All right, next, let's look at order of operations. And we have a list in the book of the order in which you should do the order of operations. And over on the side of the paper here, I'm just going to do a quick review of that. First, you do anything involving parentheses. That if there's any operation inside parentheses, you have to do that first. Next, you do exponents. And then, and this is where some of you have occasionally been taught incorrectly, next you do multiplication and division in order from left to right, and then you do addition and subtraction in order from left to right. Jerry, what's a common way most of the students may have been taught to memorize this?
Well, that's probably where the problem arises here, Bill. It's PEMDAS.
Right. A lot of you were taught this. What is that an abbreviation for?
Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally.
Yeah, there's a couple of different ways to remember this. And the problem with learning PEMDAS is this gives students the impression that you do multiplication before division and you do addition before subtraction. Unfortunately, that's not always the case, as you'll see in just a little while. So these are the rules that we recommend you pay attention to. Once you've done your parentheses and exponents, do all your multiplication and division in order from left to right, and then do all of your addition and subtraction in order from left to right. Okay, let's start doing some. Here, I do have an operation, subtraction, inside parentheses. I'm going to rewrite this as 3 plus -4. Everything else I'm just going to copy down. 3 plus -4 is -1. I now have multiplication and subtraction. I'm supposed to do all my multiplication and division before I do any addition and subtraction. So 3 times -1 is -3. And then finally, rewriting this as an addition problem, change the subtraction sign to an addition sign, change the sign of this number. So finally, 7 plus 3 is just 10.
Yes, and we do know, Bill and I have both seen the most common mistake in this problem is students that see that 7 minus 3 and right in the beginning they subtract it because it's outside the parentheses and they think, oh, it's okay if I do that. Please notice that right there, even though we don't write multiplication symbols, there's multiplication right in there, and you cannot do this before you do that. And you can't do that until you take care of this inside the parenthesis.
That's right. Remember, things next to each other in algebra always mean multiplication, even if you don't see a dot or some other multiplication sign there. All right, let's look at one that's a little bit longer. Here, we start with, I have no pen. Here, we start inside the parentheses, and inside the parentheses there are two different operations here. There's multiplication and there's subtraction. Again, we always do multiplication before we do any addition and subtraction. So I'm going to do this the long way and copy everything else down. First, I just do the multiplication. 2 times 4 is 8. Now, I still have an operation inside the parentheses, so I need to do that before I do anything else. And again, I'll rewrite this as an addition problem. 6 minus 8 is 6 plus -8. The signs are different, so 8 minus 6 is 2. 8's bigger than 6. It's negative, so the answer is negative. I now have addition and multiplication. I need to do the multiplication first. 5 times -2 is -10. Opposite sign, so the answer is negative. And finally, I'm adding. The signs are different, so 10 minus 6 is 4. 10's bigger than 6, and it's negative, so the answer is negative. Or you could go back and think about money. If you have $6, but you owe somebody $10, you're behind by $4. What were you going to say, Jerry?
Now, Bill alluded to this being the long way. What Bill has done is actually modeled the perfect approach in both these problems to doing order of operations. You always want to keep a vertical approach to doing them step by step. That way, when you are getting these wrong, your instructors can easily come by and see exactly where your mistake's at. And also, when you read our book, when you do problems in the book, the steps are shown and you can find those mistakes. Try not to be one of those students that lumps multiple steps in the same problem.
Right. It's often frustrating to write out so many steps, but particularly in these problems, it's worth spending the time. We find, I'm sure Jerry will agree, students a lot of times are very likely to have trouble with order of operations problems. Most of you think that you've learned this correctly, but we find that often students get these problems wrong. It's worth spending some time now and learning how to do them correctly. All right, we just have a few more, so let's finish it up. Here, we don't have any parentheses, but we do have an exponent. I'm supposed to do an exponent before I do any addition, subtraction, multiplication, or division. So everything else I'm just going to copy down. 2 squared means multiply 2 2's together. 2 times 2 is 4. Everything else copying down. Now, I have a whole bunch of multiplication and division. I need to do all the multiplication and division in order from left to right before I do any addition and subtraction. Notice that going in order from left to right, 4 divided by 2 is 2, times 6 gives me 12. So this is 6 minus 12. So notice, contrary to what you may think, you don't always multiply before you divide. Sometimes you divide first. finally, to get the final answer, let's rewrite this as an addition problem. 6 minus 12 is the same as 6 plus negative 12. By now, you probably can see that 6 plus negative 12 is just negative 6. All right, here we have two sets of parentheses. How do they know which sets of parentheses to do first, Jerry?
Well, they want to take care of what we call those nested parentheses, those parentheses within. A lot of times we refer to those outer ones as brackets. Good explanation, or that's a good word for them. So we want to start with the innermost here and then work our way out.
That's right. The parentheses that are closest to each other, these are closer to each other than these are. Those are the ones you want to deal with first. So everything else in the problem I'm just going to copy down. 4 minus 2 bracket 16 divided by, but 2 minus 6 is 2 plus negative 6, and 2 plus negative 6 is just negative 4. All right, so now this is a little simpler than what I started out with. Now I worry about my brackets. Again, everything else I'm just going to copy down. 16 divided by negative 4, one negative sign, so the answer is negative. 16 divided by 4 is 4. Now I have subtraction and multiplication. I do the multiplication first. 2 times negative 4 is negative 8. And finally, let's rewrite this as an addition problem. 4 minus negative 8 is 4 plus positive 8, and 4 plus 8 is just 12. Again, as Jerry said, don't try to do too many steps at once. It's worth doing these problems step by step. You're less likely to make a mistake that way. All right, and this is our final problem. This will add some absolute values so we can review that. This combines almost everything. Absolute values count as parentheses. So if you have an expression that involves absolute values, you should do whatever is inside the absolute values first. So in this problem, I'm going to rewrite inside the absolute values negative 6 minus 2 as negative 6 plus negative 2. Everything else I'm just going to copy down. And this will now be the absolute value. Negative 6 plus negative 2 is negative 8. All right, and again, absolute values count as parentheses, so simplify that expression first. Again, those absolute values make whatever is inside them positive. The absolute value of negative 8 is positive 8. Everything else I'm just copying down. I have multiplication here and division here. I have to do this multiplication and this division before I do any subtraction, but as Jerry is just about to tell me, what do I have to do first?
You've got to do that exponent.
That's right. I got so excited about the multiplication and division, but remember your list. After you've done parentheses, you look for exponents next. And I do have an exponent here. 2 cubed means 2 times 2 times 2, which is 8. So this is 4 times 8 minus 8 divided by 4. So next I need to do multiplication and division and then subtract. 4 times 8 is 32 minus 8 divided by 4 is 2. And I'm not going to rewrite this one because you know that 32 minus 2 is just 30. All right, hopefully you'll be able to do the problems in the book now. We hope that this was helpful, and we'll see you again in Chapter 5.